A very, very warm welcome to our speaker for this evening, Dr. Kurush Dalal. Many of us know him as a historian, a scholar, a great foodie, and of course, archaeologist who is specialized in the terrain of Western India and has gone really very deep into sites in Maharashtra. So Kurush, on behalf of the chairman and the trustees of the CSMVS and the staff, and on behalf of the Director General, Mr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee, my own behalf, on behalf of my executive committee and all our members and our friends of the Museum Society who have joined us here this evening for the lecture. So a very, very warm and special welcome to a person who has addressed us over the years, always acceded to our requests and been totally unflinching in his support of the Museum Society of Mumbai. And I cannot help but recollect and mention Dr. Katie Dalal, his dear mother, who was also a great friend of the museum and of the Museum Society, and never refused any request, no matter how demanding it was on her time, from our committee and from our previous chairmans whenever they asked her to say something or even provide us with some delicious food on the lawns of the museum. So thank you very, very much, Kurush, for extending yourself to us. We greatly, greatly appreciate it, especially as it comes soon after you've had an illness. I'm glad to see you're looking well. And after this pandemic, which has taken a toll on many, many of us. So thank you so much. But I would like to introduce Dr. Kurush Dalal for those of you who are recent members of the Museum Society and those of you who have joined us from other parts of the country and from overseas as well. Dr. Dalal has a BA in Ancient Indian History and History from the University of Mumbai, an MA in Archaeology, as well as a PhD on the Early Iron Age in Rajasthan, both from Deccan College, Pune University. Subsequently, he shifted focus to the early medieval period, predominantly, as I said earlier, on the west coast of India, and excavated the sites of Sanjan, Chandor, and Mandar. Some of these excavation programs are still in process, and the data recovered has had a very strong impact on scholarship in the region. The recent Mandar excavations have revealed a brand new, hitherto unknown Indo-Roman port site with antecedents going back even further. Dr. Dalal also actively works on memorial stones, and we're going to hear about it, the Ass Curse stones in India, and dabbles in numismatics, defense, archaeology, architecture, ethnoarchaeology, and allied disciplines. He's the co-director of the Salsett Explorations Project, a massive urban archaeology project documenting the archaeology of Mumbai since 2015, thus extending his interest from medieval into colonial period. He has published over 35 papers and has read many more at national and international seminars. He is a visiting lecturer at various universities, colleges, schools, and government institutions. He taught archaeology and allied subjects at the University of Mumbai for 10 years. And he has recently blended his passion for food and archaeology into a research in culinary anthropology and food archaeology. We're looking forward to some of these lectures as well, Kurush. He runs a very successful course called the Studying of Food Workshop, teaching food beyond the usual topics. Of course, he's made the most of the lockdown, teaching via Instagram lives and by teaching at various online platforms like Mythopia, and I want to know more about this, and the institution which he has been working with in the Department of Archaeology, the India Studies Center Trust, School of Archaeology. What are we going to hear today? Just a few words. I don't want to stand between Kurush and the audience. But this lecture deals with one of the largest groups of scattered medieval artifacts strewn all over the state of Maharashtra. These are the stone steles, hero stones of Virgal erected in memory of a fallen hero. Sati stones or Satigal erected in memory of a woman or women who join their deceased dead husbands, often fallen heroes themselves, on their funeral pyres. Gadhegals or asker stones, land grants, and other important documents in stone with an image of the punishment that the women receive being sexually violated by a donkey. It was hard to see these images as we were going through the slides earlier in preparation for this lecture. Other miscellaneous stelae, which include sacrificial markers, land donation markers, royal land charters, and various other such charters. These steles are scattered all over the Konkan and are part and parcel of many of our urban landscapes, where they are often reappropriated and repositioned for different purposes, which we will hear about. I think the students on this program, you have a lot to learn, and these are subjects for research which will open up to you as you go ahead with your postgraduate and or even your undergraduate and your doctoral studies. This lesser known group of memorials is a history mainly of common people and tells their stories often without any inscriptions. They're like visual sculptural forms. When we do have inscriptions, they tell us only about the kings we never knew about and the political and socio-economic conditions that prevailed during that time. So I think I'll stop here and just thank Kurush once again on behalf of all of us. And thank you to Dr. Jason Johns and the technical team with Yashraj, Aishwarya, and Renalini. Thank you for standing behind us solidly for these last 2 years. And thank you, Professor Dr. Anita Rane Kothare, who will be giving the vote of thanks at the end. So I hand Kurush over to the technical team. And ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy this wonderful journey of an area which is literally in our backyard. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for having me here. It's always an incredible pleasure to come and speak to the very erudite members of the Museum Society. I have been associated with the museum and the Museum Society all my life. Before we start, I must share a few things. My grandfather was in charge of entertaining me on holidays. My holidays were Thursdays and Sundays when I was in school. My dad was out at sea, mom was running a business. Well, every Sunday in rotation, we did the museum, we did the zoo, we did the aquarium, and we did Kamala Nehru Park. And that was our monthly routine. On Thursdays, we went to the movies together. So I kind of grew up at the museum and seeing the various exhibits and kind of running around and making a general pain of myself to the museum staff. And I think all of them have remembered me through the years for various different reasons. When I went to college, I found out that the museum was shut on Mondays, but free on Tuesdays. So I spent most of my Tuesdays sitting in the museum, very often with a book, a packet of Monaco biscuits, and a bottle of water, from gallery to gallery, making notes, looking at things, reading up things, wondering why things were one way or the other. I still remember that as I entered the concourse in the old days, which doesn't look like it does today, on the left and right were two balcony galleries, and the left-hand gallery always had its grill gate shut. And it led most people to believe that it was closed, but it wasn't locked. You see, the grill gate was kept shut because there were certain Ashleel images on that gallery, and children were to be kept out. Well, children are the last people you can keep out when you keep things closed. So from a very early age, I was wondering about all kinds of really weird things that were depicted on some of these stone steles over there. And my fascination for a lot of these offbeat things actually grew out of the museum. So this lecture of mine today is virtually a testament of gratitude to the museum and the museum society. But I've heard so many brilliant lectures, come to so many absolutely lovely expositions by experts from all over the world. So I'm very grateful to the Director General of the museum and his entire staff, to Dr. Firoza Godrej and everybody at uh, the Museum Society, to Dr. Jason Johns. Must congratulate him again on getting a PhD and getting into that ratified group of mad people, and all of you all who are assembled here today. So I won't take very much more of your time, and I will launch into today's official uh, presentation. I hope I don't bore you to tears. So today's lecture, when Dr. Godrej asked me what I'd like to speak on, I thought I'd speak on something that was a little hatke, a little different. I'm going to talk about the silent stone sentinels of medieval Maharashtra, and this is something that has become very dear to me over time. The things that we're going to be talking about are essentially a series of different stone steles that are scattered virtually all over our backyards. And I'm going to show you one graphic of one type just in the city of Bombay to tell you how much of this is very much right under our own noses and we do not realize. So essentially, we're going to talk about hero stones, Sati stones, Gadhegals. We're going to talk about Daivasru pillars. We're going to talk about some Buddhist Samadhi stones, which are more recent. And we're going to refer to a few other stones because there's only that much that we can pack into an hour, hour and a half over here today. And hopefully maybe we can come back and pick this up maybe a year or two later when I've got a little more data in my bag and can speak with a little more confidence on some of the other sub-varieties that we're talking about. So hero stones essentially are stone steles or pillars. So they can be flat, rectangular cross-section steles, or they can be pillars raised in memory of the dead warriors. And this is a raising monuments to dead warriors is something that goes back all the way to the early historical period. And it goes back even further into the megalithic period, where we have the megalithic burials scattered all across the Indian peninsula, chief among which are the raising of menhirs. And many people believe that it's the tradition of raising these stone memorials that then translates ultimately into the beautifully carved stones, which we call hero stones, or Virgal, or Virkal, or Virgallu, depending on which part of peninsular India we are in. Definitely, the corollary of these hero stones are Sati stones. Very, very similar to hero stones in many ways. They usually follow the same pattern, but it's usually about the Sati, almost always a hero's wife, who joins the hero on his funeral pyre. We can consider it today an incredibly barbaric practice, but at one time it was considered a mark of singular honor, and the Sati was venerated virtually as a goddess. She was giving up everything to assure that her husband achieved heaven. And this is something that I find sometimes a little difficult to wrap my head around and often a little distasteful too. But what you have to realize is you cannot sit in judgment upon the past. You have to accept what has gone on before and make sure that you change things in the here and now. Gadhegals are an even more understudied series of stones, and they essentially more often than not are land grant stones, supposedly first introduced in Maharashtra during the reign of the Shilaharas, and they're named after the image of a woman being sexually violated by a donkey, which is seen on them. More about them in a little bit. All three are usually seen commonly in three panels. They commonly have a disc and a crescent on the top. This is the solar and lunar symbols. And in cases of hero stones and Sati stones, maybe 4, 5, or even more paneled. Usually, Gadhegals are 3-paneled or less. Now, before we launch into what I call the medieval period, I'd like to specify what I mean by the medieval period. There are too many anomalies in history. Too often are terms bandied about without being defined. And I think it's very, very critical that we do so. So according to me, the medieval period is that which stitches the early historical and the colonial eras. and bridges these two periods. It's also the definitive period for a lot of Indian culture and history. The dates that I go by, the medieval starts in 647 AD with the death of Harshavardhan of Taneshwar and the end of the early historic era, and continues all the way to the 23rd of June, 1757, and the Battle of Plassey, where Bengal ultimately falls into the hands of the British Empire and our colonial past, well, begins to take shape. This period can also be very easily broken into two parts. I call it the early medieval and the later medieval. Most scholars refer to it similarly, but once again, I'd like to be very precise about what I'm talking about. The early medieval period is from 647 AD to the 20th of April, 1526, the first battle of Panipat, where Babur beats the Lodhis and establishes Mughal dominion of India. The period of the Mughals, the Marathas, and the subsequent dynasties is the later medieval period, and this is usually very clear and is defined as the later medieval period in most history classes, and well, may or may not continue all the way to 1818 and the fall of the Peshwas at the Battle of Khadki. I choose to cut it off at 1757, where I believe the colonial era in India actually starts. What you've got to understand is that the colonies actually come to India much earlier. It's by 1498, in the early medieval period itself, that Vasco da Gama makes it to India. By 1526, when the Battle of Plassey takes place, the Portuguese are very well established on the western coast of India and extending towards the eastern coast. These two periods cover a vast period of time and numerous dynasties. They form the bedrock of Indian history. Indian archaeology tends to skirt its way around them. When I was taught archaeology also, this entire period was more or less omitted from my curriculum. I wondered why this stepmotherly treatment was being given, especially considering that most of temple architecture in India and mosque architecture in India and palace architecture, and even, well, more than 98% of defense architecture all belong to this epoch and was very, very much a part of archaeology. But, well, for whatever reason, it didn't seem to be part of the archaeology curriculum. Archaeologists and historians are notoriously walled up in their individual jagirs and refer to each other in the third person if they have to at all. When I moved into working in medieval archaeology, I realized exactly why very few people do medieval archaeology. And the reason for this is that medieval archaeology is very difficult. Number one, you have to understand medieval history. You have to be able to correlate medieval history with medieval archaeology and vice versa. And an enormous amount of medieval archaeology does not find any mention in medieval history, and thus making sense of it becomes a very, very complicated topic. Maharashtra during the early medieval period saw a huge amount of history take place. Dynasties rose and fell. There were invasions from the south. There were invasions from the north. The Rashtrakutas first come charging into this area and establish their dominion. They're coming out of Karnataka. Their language is Kannada. Their script is Hale Kannada. And they leave their mark behind in a very, very big way on Maharashtra, its art, its architecture, its culture, etc. Their vassals, for example, the Shilaharas, rule over the entire Konkan, and after the fall of the Rashtrakutas, establish themselves as independent dynasties. The Kadambas rule in Goa. There are also the southern Shilaharas and the Karaj Shilaharas, etc. So there are numerous branches. There are the Chalukyas who already raised their heads, then kept themselves quiet during the Rashtrakuta epoch. They come back as what we call the later Chalukyas, and they bring battle all the way to Bombay, as we will see. And of course, you have the subsequent arrival of what we call the Islamic dynasties and the Islamic invasion of India. We have our good friend Muhammad Alauddin Khilji, who strikes down into the south in about 1297, 1298 AD. He defeats Ramchandra Deva Yadava and makes peace with him for an annual tribute. Ramchandra Deva Yadava sadly decides not to give that tribute after a couple of years. thinking that Alauddin Khilji is too busy to worry about it. Khilji then assures that Ramchandra Deva loses his entire empire and, well, willy-nilly ends up starting what we call the Sultanate period of Maharashtra. It doesn't start immediately, it takes some time, but it does. You have very interesting evidence now, and I hope to do another lecture with the Museum Society in June or July, talking about what we call the actual Delhi Sultanates ruling over Bombay at one time, and a local king of the city of Mumbai who ruled from Mumbai, about whom most Mumbaikars are completely and totally unaware. But that's for another day. We have the Bahmani Sultanate. It's followed by the famous 5 sultanates, of which it is 3 that are really worth talking about: Bijapur, Ahmednagar, and of course, Golconda. Berar and Bedach do not really last very long. You have the arrival of the Mughals coming down into the Deccan as early as the reign of Jahangir, followed by the reign of Shah Jahan. We know that the port of Surat becomes critically important to them for going out on the Hajj. And we also know that they come into conflict with the very Sardars who have fought with them and for them and against them in the form of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. We have the rise of the early Maratha Empire, as I like to call it, under first Shahaji briefly. Very few people know that he actually controlled Chaul almost as an independent ruler briefly before he was forced to hand it over to the Mughals. Then subsequently under Shivaji Maharaj and Shambhaji Maharaj, and then of course the rise of the Peshwe Shahi, which continues all the way to 1818. So this is the history of medieval Maharashtra in a very, very small nutshell, and I apologize for those who feel that I've forgotten some people. It was a time of great warfare. Maharashtrian warriors fought in wars across the country, from Bengal to Gujarat, from the plains of the Ganga all the way down deep into Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Maharashtrian warriors were part of armies everywhere. In a poor agrarian era, war was one of the few routes of escape. It was one of the few ways in which you could have caste upliftment. Because if you left a landless laborer and came back a rich, decorated war veteran, it raised your status automatically. It also gave scions of Maratha families that were developing during this era some place to hone their skills. And of course, very often they fell in battle. Very often brother fought against brother in opposing armies, and Maharashtra sent out its young men to fight other people's battles. Sending out these young men to fight other people's battles resulted in a large number of memorials to these warriors, these fallen warriors. And these memorials dot the countryside of Maharashtra and are some of the least respected, least studied archaeological and historical monuments anywhere in the world. This is a really, really sad thing. The history of early medieval Maharashtra is a history that's very, very bare bones. We have copperplate grants and a few stone inscriptions of various rulers. We know who ruled when and where, and we sometimes knew who fought whom. We don't really know about the common man. We don't really understand the social structure of Maharashtra during this period. We don't understand what was happening to the Rayat. And this is the history of the silent sentinels of medieval Maharashtra that we are going to talk about in today's lecture further on. Many of these land grants we find on stone steles. These stone steles have often been reused, repurposed, broken, so on and so forth. And some of them have been treated in such a cavalier and lousy fashion that it's not even worth talking about more than anything else, but one needs to, because this is our history. So what are hero stones? Hero stones are known as Virgal, Virgal, Virgallu, Virkal. So Virkal in Tamil Nadu, Virgal or Virgallu in Karnataka, and Virgal in Maharashtra. And this word essentially can be broken up very simply into Veer or brave / brave warrior. or hero, and Gal or Gallu as stone. Now, this is not a Marathi word. The word Gal is not actually a Marathi word or a early Marathi word. It's actually a Kannada word. And it makes a lot of sense because the hero stone tradition really comes to Maharashtra from Karnataka, where there are probably at last count, I think, somewhere around 3,000 documented hero stones. Yes, Karnataka has more hero stones so far than any other place in India. I honestly believe that Maharashtra probably has as many, if not more, but we just haven't paid attention to it. The main reason for this is that the hero stones of Karnataka bear inscriptions in most cases. The hero stones of Maharashtra are mainly silent. The few that have inscriptions are normally found very close to the Maharashtra-Karnataka border, and more often than not, the inscription is also a Kannada inscription. There is one such very interesting stone at the Kolhapur State Museum of the Department of Archaeology and Museums, Maharashtra State. And if you are there, you can see it. It's been beautifully installed over there. Hero stones are usually, standard hero stones are 3 patterned. There are 4 and 5 paneled hero stones. There are hero stones which have 7, 11, and even 12 panels, but those are very, very rare. Okay. The story starts from the lowermost panel and goes to the uppermost panel. And what is very, very interesting is that it is a narrative tradition. It's basically telling you a story, a visual story, a graphic story without any words. And it's a story written to be seen by those who cannot read, but those who can see. So the lowermost panel usually depicts the death of the warrior, usually in battle, often also, interestingly, on a cattle raid. This might be dying whilst raiding cattle. This might be dying whilst defending the cattle of a city, state, village, etc. And this itself is a very, very interesting kind of hero story. The lowermost panel shows the hero caparisoned in battle. Very often in the simpler hero stones, it's a one-on-one fight and he's been killed. In more complicated hero stones, you have entire battle scenes and much, much more data. The middle panel depicts the hero flanked by 2 women. He has his arms draped on them and they appear to be almost flying through the air. And this is something that led a lot of people to wonder as to what exactly was going on here, why there were suddenly these 2 women, or sometimes 4 women flanking the hero, always in pairs. There are a couple of cases of even 6 and 8 women on very elaborate hero stones in Karnataka. And the interesting answer to this actually comes to us from the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata, and Philosopher has done some very interesting work and published this in Setter's volume on hero stones. Philosopher says essentially that the Mahabharata states that when a warrior dies, 2 apsaras come down to take him to the court of Indra, to take him to heaven. So this is a very, very interesting representation of this tradition that we see in the hero stones of peninsular India. The panel above this usually is showing a seated gentleman offering worship to a shivling, in front of which or behind which is a small seated Nandi. And this is the fact that the hero has achieved Kailash. He is now Kailashwasi and has reached heaven for his meritorious deeds, his bravery in battle, etc., etc. The top of the stone has a pediment. The pediment is usually covered with a Mangal Kalasha in the center, talking about its auspicious nature, and small images of a moon and a sun in low relief. And these are part of the very famous saying, Chandra Surya Viraje, which means as long as the sun and the moon shall remain, the memory of this hero shall remain amongst the people. Hero stones can be found in clusters. They are found very often outside temples. Very often they're erected outside temples, and other places they're found in fields or while digging up houses and are taken to the nearest temple because there is an enormous degree of respect for these objects. People have often forgotten what these objects are about, but their sacred nature has not been forgotten. And these are usually carried to temple premises and left leaning against temple walls. And temples in Maharashtra abound with these, again, something that people pass by without even realizing. And this is one of the great tragedies, that there is so much archaeological and historical data just sitting there, shouting out to be collected, but we aren't doing anything about it. So what do hero stones tell us? They primarily tell us about battles. They tell us about the cult of hero worship. They tell us about arms, armor, animals, ships, etc. used in battle. They tell us about battle formations. They give us some of the most interesting data on early fortifications. And whilst there are very few such depictions in Maharashtra, there are a large number of siege depictions that we get from Karnataka. And these tell us about the kind of stone forts that we don't expect to see in a pre-Saracenic architecture era. And this itself is a huge field in which somebody should start working very soon. They tell us about the religious affiliations of the warriors. And what is very interesting is that, well, almost across the board, most of them appear to be Shaivite. But there are hero stones with Ganesh on them. There are hero stones with the Vishnu depiction. There are hero stones with the depiction of Mahalakshmi. And a few other deities are also known. And there is a young man from Maharashtra who has tabulated more than 1,800 hero stones and has a fabulous list of them. And I hope that he comes out with some kind of a volume soon. They very often commemorate very important battles. They commemorate the fall of rulers. At Iksar at Borivali, there is a fantastic set of five hero stones, the most ornate, most beautiful hero stones in Maharashtra, right in Mumbai's backyard. And most Mumbaikars have never seen them. They used to lie on a low mound where everybody could see them from around. Today, they're in the backyard of a tall, multi-story cement concrete tower. The most beautiful of them is broken and lies in pieces. They've been embedded in cement, and you have to take permission from the chowkidar to view what is everybody's heritage. This is the sad state in which our heritage lies, because we haven't done enough about it. It talks about an important era in Shilahara history in the middle of the 13th century AD, when the Shilaharas were defeated by the Chalukyas in a tremendous sea battle. The Shilahara lands were laid waste, and the new Shilahara ruler coming had to bring back peace to his empire. There is also, very interestingly, the earliest depiction of the term Chhatrapati that we see in graphic form. The Chhatrapati is basically somebody who has the right to have an umbrella held over him. This is the mark of regnal status, and only those belonging to the royal family can have a chhatra over them. Very often the hero who falls in battle comes from such a royal house, is a king or a prince, and is depicted with somebody symbolically holding a chhatra above him. And this tells us where this term has become so prominent from, that it ultimately became the denominative term for a ruler in medieval Maharashtra. The cattle raid stones also tell us about the emblematic, internecine problems of cattle raids and the defense of cattle, and how cattle were the wealth of the people, where there was no deep monetization, and there was essentially only an agro-pastoral society in most of Maharashtra. Hero stones in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka often have lengthy inscriptions on them. In Karnataka, you can have reams of data on a single hero stone, and a single hero stone or a set of hero stones at a single temple can be enough to do a PhD upon. But almost all of them in Maharashtra are devoid of this. And this says something about the literacy levels of the soldiers who went and fought in these battles, or who fought in battles in Maharashtra itself, that almost without exception, the hero stones of Maharashtra are devoid of any inscriptions whatsoever. This is a typical 3-panel elaborate hero stone. It has a massive Mangal Kalasha on the top. Each of the panels has pilasters on the sides. Over here, you can see the hero being carried up by the Apsaras. The death of the hero panel is enigmatic. He's inside this large container. And one of the recommendations is that possibly this denotes a prison and that the hero died in prison. I don't really know, but I am willing to accept that. This is what we very often call a Chalukyan style hero stone because it mimics the typical Chalukyan hero stones of Karnataka. We also have very simple hero stones like this one over here. By the way, here you see the hero offering worship to the Shivling. On the other side is a priest. There are divine beings bearing garlands over here. Okay, so the Vidyadharas and the gods are all looking down at the hero as he becomes Kailashwasi. You have simpler ones of a hero alone with a Shivling in front, him being raised up by two Apsaras over here. This is my good friend and colleague, Dr. Andre Baptista, as a young student working with me at Chandor. And these are both hero stones from the Chandor site. This is one of the most interesting hero stones recovered at Bandra by Mr. Vikram Rao. And this was found in Bandra. This is a sadly broken and very badly damaged, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But you see the death of the hero scene, you see the mustachios, you see a bow, you see a quiver of arrows. Now, this is very interesting. This tells us very specifically that arrows were kept in quivers that were slung over the back. You have a sword which is held in what is called a reverse grip. Okay, you have a shield over here, you have the other warrior with his raised sword, and you have again both of them shown with mustachios, large earrings, and of course buns at the back of their heads. The kind of short dhotis that they're wearing, the kadas on their feet, etc., are very, very interesting. Sadly, the top panel is very badly, the middle panel is damaged, and the top is missing. This is a typical 3-panel hero stone. This is from Kevin Sandage's collection. You see the hero over here, usually the larger figure, dying in battle, carrying shield and spear against shield and spear bearers, ascending to heaven with 2 women over here depicted, and arriving in heaven over here. This is the hero, by the way. This figure with a kamandalu in its hand and large jatas flowing at the back is a typical sage from Maharashtra, a typical Pandit from Maharashtra, typical Sadhu from Maharashtra, conducting the puja over here in heaven. There are lots of these very, very interesting depictions, and they become very, very elaborate of these officials officiating in the heavens. These are the excerpt hero stones as they were originally found. These are the, well, there are technically 6 hero stones over here laid out. There's one more fragment today, and therefore they're called the Sat Asra, or the 7 goddesses, and are in the process of being turned into a goddess cult. This is an old black and white photograph. I think, if I'm not wrong, this is in the British Museum collection. You see that these are all 4-paneled hero stones over here. And this one over here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 panels. This one is sadly broken right here. And again over here, and this portion lies at the side over here now, buried in cement. The middle portion is missing. It's one of the great tragedies. This is what the hero stones look like today. The biggest one that should have been here is missing. This is where it is lying on the side. Only one small fragment of it. These are the 2 on the right-hand side that you see in close-up. You can see the entire battle scene over here with elephants, etc. And again, the hero dying in battle over here, being raised to the heavens and arriving in heaven in both of these. Similarly, over here, a multi-compartmentalized upper panel depicting various different gods and goddesses looking down at the hero offering worship in Kailash. This is that amazing 8-paneled hero stone. What is most important about the Exer hero stones is that two of the Exer hero stones actually show death at sea in a naval battle. And these are the ships that are shown of the medieval period. Please note the pilasters, the half pillars on the sides. In this case, you have 5 different multi-oared ships with their sails having been reefed, and each of them has a beautiful mast. Similarly, over here, coming into attack, there is an attack in progress on this ship, and this is where the hero dies over here in this scene. These are a very, very famous battle fought off the coast of Borivali between the Chalukyas and the Shilaharas, and it is recorded, we believe, in these stones. These are the memorials at Ratwad on the highway. They used to be within inches of trucks when the highway was enlarged. This is on the Bombay, or rather the Panvel, Pane, Roha highway today. And they were moved behind by the highways department, and this one was broken into 3 pieces. I have earlier photographs showing it intact. This is part of the photograph that you saw on the poster for today's event. Please note the beautiful, elaborate kalashas that you see over here in 3 of these cases, telling you once again that these were very, very important memorials. Over here, we have the hero ascending to heaven in a boat. And this is very peculiar. So you have the death of the hero scene over here, and you have the hero along with 2 women ascending to heaven in a beautiful boat, as though there is a vimana of some sort being depicted over here. You again have various different similar scenes on these panels over here. And obviously, there was a major battle fought at Rathwad. And from this image, if you look very closely, you will see the umbrella being held over the hero. This is the umbrella bearer is behind. This is the hero falling in battle over here. And this tells you that there was a royal persona who died in battle at Rathwad, and that these memorials were laid alongside his memorial, which is the tallest and largest, commemorating him and his brave warriors who fell in battle over here. Now, which battle this was, why it was fought at Rathwad, why Rathwad was important, all these questions need to be asked and need to be answered and need much, much more research than just stopping by to take a picture over here. There are interestingly very, very rare Buddhist hero stones. The one on the right is an image by my weekend Odysseys. I also have images of these, but I was in a hurry yesterday and I couldn't find the one that I wanted to put in this PPT. This is a Buddhist hero stone, and you can very clearly see a Buddhist stupa on top. You can see the Anda over here. You can see the Medhi over here. You can see the Harmika and the Chhatra on top. And you can see the hero and his wife ascending to heaven. This one is even rarer. This is a very, very late 12th century hero stone from a place called Mandhatne in the Konkan. You can see the hero's death scene over here. You can see the feet of 2 warriors fighting very clearly in the central panel. The bottom panel, interestingly, shows a seated Buddha in Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. This is the only such known example. For those of you all who are interested, if you follow me on academia.edu, this article is up for anybody who wants to read it or refute it. I am very happy for all takers to come and discuss it further. Just to give you an idea of what some of the hero stones from Karnataka look like, the Kannadigas are very, very lucky. They have this beautiful stone called greenish grayish chloritic schist. I still remember Anita teaching me this term many, many years ago. And this is a typical 3-paneled hero stone from there. This is the hero dying in battle, okay? Taking down this horse with his sword, always the reverse grip being shown. Please note over here, this is a very interesting thing. Over here, you have the hero being struck down by royalty, and the hero himself is royalty. And you can see the Chhatras on top of both. And you have, of course, the hero flanked by 4 Apsaras. Probably the hero and his companion are both depicted here, rising up to heaven. It could also be the hero and his wife being depicted here, rising up to heaven, where the Pujari with his Jata Mukuta on top is offering worship to this Shivling. There is a Nandi here, and there is a massive inscription over here, and again continues over here, telling the story of this hero. Now, this is a very rare multi-paneled hero stone, even for Karnataka, and its elaborate hero stones with this beautiful soft stone in which you can put in much more than you can into the basalt of Maharashtra. This is a monumental hero stone and has 6 different panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes, I'm right. And a very, very interesting set of triple Mangal Kalashas and even a more elaborate border on top. This is one of my favorite hero stones. This is a 12th century AD hero stone from Tarakeshwara temple at Hangal in Karnataka. The inscription is year, 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 and also year. And it is in Hale Kannada. I want you to see 2 panels very specifically that I've highlighted, the lower panel and this panel over here. This is the ascension to heaven with the Apsaras. This is his arrival in heaven, the worship of the Shivlinga, and that he has reached Kailasha. There is a beautiful temple-like Kalasha over here, very, very interesting. This is, of course, the death scene of the hero. You notice once again the Chhatra on top of him. Again, a Chhatrapati going into battle on horseback, cavalry and infantry charging cavalry and elephants, archers on elephant back, the entire scene of the warrior's death over here. This scene is very interesting. This warrior dies attacking a fortress, and this is the fortress over here, and you can see beautifully the stone crenellations of the top of the fortress, and you can see the warriors inside the fortress looking down at the scene of battle. So this kind of depiction is very, very important for us to understand that there is a lot that we are missing out on, that there is a lot of defense architecture that we need to look at once again, and that there are perhaps things that are more peculiar than those that meet the eye. This is a typical Chalukyan style hero stone. This one is from Chandor. It has a beautiful story behind it, but you have the pilasters over here. You have a beautiful panel where there could have been an inscription, which is not there. An elaborate but simple Mangal Kalasha on top. There is a sun sign, moon sign over here. There would have been a sun on this broken fragment. When we clean this, this is what we got. On horseback, with a chhatra over him, going into battle and dying over here. A beautiful narrative that is shown across this panel, and of course being raised to heaven over here. And this is the Shivling, and this is the hero having arrived at heaven, and the gods are all in attendance. It would be very interesting if we had the bottom portion, but sadly this was broken off and was found lying almost completely buried. Only this much of the stele was visible above the ground, and even that was covered in dry leaves and grasses and so on and so forth. We now come to the second, and I think I'm going too slow. I should speed this up a little bit, otherwise Froza ma'am will be upset at how much time I'm taking. The earliest records of Satis go back to the 3rd, 4th century BC. We have Greek writers who come with our good friend Alexander, who talk about this bizarre habit of women immolating themselves on the pyres of their husbands. And they think, of course, that everybody in India probably does this. This is, of course, typical of the Greeks, but there is this very clear mention. It really becomes popular only post the 8th century, 9th century AD, after the Mori Rajput tribes invade what is Rajputana, parts of Malwa and Gujarat, and they bring with them their own traditions. This, of course, spreads all over. The earliest known Sati stone, I think I'm going to show you an image of it, actually comes to us from the 6th century AD. This is the typical 3-panel Sati stone. This is from Devare. You have the Sati over here. The story, of course, starts from the bottom. You have the logs. These are logs, by the way, of the funeral pyre. You have the flames rising up in all directions. You have the body of the warrior lying on the lap of his wife, who has her right hand raised up in what is the symbol of the Sati. Always the right hand raised up palm outwards at a right angle. This is always seen on a Sati stone. This is symbolic of the Sati. There are always bangles. You can see vestiges of bangles over here. Sadly, it's broken across. Then the middle panel usually has the arm of the Sati. Sometimes it can go all through. Sometimes it can be only the arm that separates the upper two panels. And there are not clear panels like this. And there is the Sati over here in the center, blessing two people who are carrying loads on their heads. We really don't know what this is. Okay. But this is commonly seen. Very often she's seen on horseback doing the same thing. And of course, here is the Sati and her husband offering worship to the Shivling with the Nandi below and the Pujari performing the rituals. There is a Mangal Kalasha on top. You can see the sun symbol over here very clearly, and what's left of the lunar symbol. On this side are Chandra Surya Viraje. So a Sati stone or a Sati gal, again, the same terminology, is a stone commemorating the sacrifice of a wife on the funeral pyre of a husband. In rare cases, more than one wife. So there are a large number of, well, surprisingly large number of twin Sati stones and Sati pillars. And there are also triple Sati stones, but those are incredibly rare. In my work in Maharashtra, I have only come across twin Sati stones. I have never come across a triple myself. They basically follow the same stylistics as a hero stone, 3 panels. One single complex panel is very often seen also, especially in the later period. We have a simplified version of this, and the immolation scene is usually seen at the bottom. This very often gets omitted in later panels. So what do we have on the Sati stone? This is the lowermost panel, as I told you. This is the central panel. This is the pillar of the Sati. This outside of this thing, a yupa or a pillar of sorts from which extends the symbolic hand of the Sati. In southern Maharashtra, we often actually see a proper pillar over here with a kalasha on top of it, from which this hand extends outwards. And we have the Sati blessing 2 individuals on her way to heaven, the Sati and her husband having reached Kailash. Most important always is that the hand of the Sati is always clad in bangles as a sign of her marriage status and the fact that she walks to her husband's altar, not as a widow, but as a married woman. This is the earliest known Sati stone anywhere in India. This is the Aaron pillar of Goparaja. It's considered the earliest Sati stone. It actually talks about the death of Goparaja and the immolation of his wife on his pyre. There is Goparaja and his wife. She has her right arm upraised and palm outwards over here. And this is dated to 510 AD. So making this one of the earliest of these cultic stones. Interesting to note that this time Aaron is seeing the influx of large numbers of very interesting people who are coming from the roof of the world. We have the Hunas coming into this region, and some of their influences along with the tribes that come with them seem to be quite apparent in some of these cultural norms that are being adopted by the people of this region. Just to give you an example of different types of Sati stones, this is a beautiful Sati stone from Karnataka. Interestingly, there's a massive inscription here on the pediment. Shivling, sun, moon, the hero over here, the Sati. This is a slightly later stone, I'm told. Again, certainly most of this data is in Kannada, and a lot of it needs to be translated into English for scholars across the world. This is a typical Rajasthani hero stone or a hero pillar. You see this beautiful fluted pillar over here with this top, and you see the Sati hand, and you see the bangles over here. This is a very late 18th century AD hero stone from Gujarat, if I remember right. And you see again the sun and the moon symbol, you see the hand of the Sati, you see the bangles over here, you have the Sati and husband, and a Devanagari inscription on this. This is the site of Chandor, and these are 2 different Sati stones lying side by side. and a broken fragment. We subsequently found the other pieces I'll show you of a twin Sati pillar. You can see two hands over here, it's broken. So there would have been two hands cradling one another at a right angle over here. This is the older wife or the chief wife. This is the younger wife, and it's not the size of the hands, but the number of the bangles which determines this. She wears a large number of bangles, she wears a small number of bangles. So this is both the wives together with their hands raised on the pyre of the husband. You see the logs over here and the flames rising up. Two of them riding to heaven on horses and united here with their husband in heaven. So this is a typical pillar, and the story goes in a wraparound fashion. These are the typical stelae, or the three-chambered stelae as we call them. Here is the Sati with her hand raised up, husband's body on her lap, fire behind her, going up, blessing just two symbolic heads over here. On horseback, don't miss this thick pillar over here, okay, with a kalasha on top over here, and arm coming out with a large kada and smaller bangles. Open palm, hero and wife in heaven, no shivling here, okay, and of course a Mangal Kalasha on top. Here no Mangal Kalasha, but a shivling and a Nandi are quite visible over here. Hero and his wife, again the same hand, but no pillar formation like this, just the block over here, blessing two people with loads on their heads. And of course here she is on the pyre of her husband, and there is some kind of an interesting kunda here which is also shown, which doesn't make much sense to us today. This is the site of Devare. Devare has a what is called a Devrai. So these are religious groves, sacred groves in Maharashtra. And at Devare, we have a large number of Sati stones collected over here at the site. I was told about this site by my director, Dr. Mugdha Karnik, who said, by the way, Kurush had gone here many years ago. She's a sociologist. And I noticed about 25 or 30 of these lying scattered around the temple at Devare in the Devrai. When I went there were far fewer. We documented them all carefully, and we published this in Heritage, which is published by Kerala University. And you can see the different types of hero stones over here. This is a single panel hero stone, just an arm, rectangular hero stone. Sati and hero, rectangular Sati stone, Sati and husband over here. You have slightly more complex twin paneled ones where the arm is depicted over here with a decorative pillar. Seated on a stool are the Sati and husband, immolation on the bottom. And of course, you have the three chambered variety and a two chambered variety and a single one. These are the ones at the back that you can't see clearly in this top picture. Again, twin over here. This is an amazingly complicated one in a single panel, which actually shows the immolation and the arrival in heaven and the shivling on top. And we have various different other types. This one is from the Gorobakaka temple at Ter in southern Maharashtra. Please notice the arm. Please notice the pointed topped pillar flaring outwards. The Sati Yupa or the Sati pillar. Notice the Sati on horseback over here. Very badly cowed. Sati and her husband over here with a small shivling in front. Again, not really detailed. The detail is all over here. There is a kada or a decorative blouse, and there are bangles shown very clearly on her hand. Sometimes there is a small mark, an auspicious mark over here. This is the twin Sati hand, as I told you, from Chandor. You can see the sun and the moon over here. This entire thing is now Mangal Kalasha on top. You can see the twin arms, and you can see the multiple bangles here and the fewer bangles over here. So senior wife, junior wife, both committing Sati on the altar of their husband. What do Sati girls tell us? Sati girls tell us about the prevailing conditions where women were expected to martyr themselves, where women were expected to commit ritual suicide on the graves of their husbands, and where this was a very, very prevalent tradition all over India, especially in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh during this period. And this assured the hero of a 100% entry into heaven, provided his wife immolated herself on his funeral pyre. It says a lot about the treatment of women during the medieval period in Maharashtra, and we're going to see this deterioration in the status of women even further. What you see on the right-hand side is the Parel Gadhegal from the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangralaya. I'm very, very grateful to Mukherjee sir for laying open his repository, and when we studied these in detail, giving us access to images of all the Gadhegals, and you'll be surprised to know how many there are in the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangralaya, collected over the years. This is the Parel Gadhegal of the Shilahara era. Please notice the sun, moon, Mangal Kalasha. This is the top panel in a Gadhegal. This is the inscription panel in a Gadhegal. It's not always there. In later period Gadhegals, there is just this, and this will be much larger. Sometimes this will also be more elaborate, depending on the situation and depending on who is giving the grant. This is a land grant being given, an Agrahara grant, and this is the punishment for the violation of said grant. This is what gives this stone its name, Gadhegal, or ass stone, or ass curse stone, as it's translated into English. It is an auspicious act of a land grant, but there is a rather inauspicious looking panel underneath. This panel is normally not as finely made as the rest of the stone, and this has led to a lot of speculation that the people who carved these were, well, perhaps of lesser status in society than people who actually did things like writing and inscribing things, which are seen on the top. And this is quite obvious because in many of the Gadhegals, this seems to be almost intrusive, unlike this one over here, where it's very much part of what it has to be. This was obviously prepared in advance because quite a bit of space has been wasted, and the inscription has been scrunched up only in this much. This shows a donkey with a rather large erect penis, sexually violating a woman. The curse, which is very often actually written in the lines over here, or what is called the word that is used by the deprecatory verse in an inscription, actually has the words "I Gadhede Zavize." This is one of the earliest Marathi terms that you will find in Maharashtra, and well, a lot of Marathi scholars are not very proud of that, but it is a fact. This is what it is. So sometimes there is just the logograph. More often than not, there is, of course, also the term of the curse itself, or the deprecatory verse. V.V. Mirashi, who actually looks at a lot of these inscriptions, cuts off all his images over here and says the deprecatory verse followed, the deprecatory image followed, so on and so forth. And it talks about a time when these things were considered very Victorianly ashleel, or well. So interestingly, tons and tons of these Gadhegals exist all across the length and breadth of Maharashtra. Gadhegals are mentioned obliquely in Tulpule's Prachin Maharashtra Purimlekh. They are mentioned in Dikshit's work. They are mentioned in Mirashi's work, but they're all mentioned as, by the way, this is also there on the stone. There is an article by me. There is, of course, Kolte. There is my article from Divyagar, which talks about 4 Gadhegals of Divyagar and Devkol. And of course, there is Rupali Bokashi's early article, published first in Marg and then in the IGIRD. The main work in Gadhegals being carried out today is being virtually carried out by a one-woman institution in her own right, Ms. Harshada Virkud, who's with the Department of Archaeology and Museums, Maharashtra State. Harshada has been working on this from 2013 onwards as a postgraduate diploma dissertation student where she came to me. And we decided to document the ones that were known, and we documented about 33 odd Gadhegals in 2013-14. Sorry, 2012-13. We then went on to apply to the Tata Trust, to whom I'm very grateful, for a project, and they gave us a project, and we thought we'd put this out on social media and ask for this and show images of this. One of the most amazingly effective uses of social media in my life. We had to stop at 125. We thought we'd document maybe 60 or 70. We had to stop at 125. Last year, Harshada has gone beyond 150 and counting. So this is just in Maharashtra itself. Now, a lot of articles have been published. Sandeep Daisarkar has published one. Many others have now come to the fore and published a series of articles talking about these, where they've come across them in their researches now that they know what to identify. These two steles are the steles for the earliest Marathi inscription in Maharashtra. Not the earliest Marathi inscription per se, that is still Chamunda Rayasa Karavirisa from Shravan Belgola. But this on the left is the Akshi stele of Keshideva, dated by Tulpule to 1012 AD. Both Mirashi and M.G. Dikshit disagree. It was very, very badly worn out by the time they came across it, and the date was quite worn too. Tulpule has stuck to his guns in his work and has, of course, been. Today, when you go there, there are just one or two alphabets that you can see over here, and it's otherwise almost completely worn out. In 2012, it was 1,000 years of Marathi in Maharashtra, and nobody in Maharashtra celebrated the Akshi Gadhegal apart from the Center for Extramural Studies and the India Study Center Trust. And we took our students there, and we've been taking our students there ever since. This is at the CSFVS. On that beautiful balcony on the left-hand side of the gallery, right at the end, is the Vihar stele of Anantadeva, dated to 1081 AD. Without any doubt, this is 1081 AD. And this is the earliest Marathi inscription found anywhere in Maharashtra. This bottom part of the inscription has never really been deciphered. The top is published by Mirashi in CII volume 6. And this is, of course, the Gadhegal image over here. Please note the collar. Very often the donkey is shown as a domesticated animal, okay, in this act. There are various types of Gadhegals. There are Gadhegals where there is a long inscription on the top and then the small depiction over here. There is a larger depiction in a more or less standing pose, and inscription above and below, inscription and a very small incut. This one is from Vasai. This one is Anantadeva's inscription of 1245 AD from the southern Konkan at Divyagar. This was lost and then found again by us. This is a inscription with an inscription panel has been made but has never been inscribed. This is from Devkhol. This is from northern Mumbai, and this was discovered by a team led by Dr. Prachi Moge and Suraj Pandit. And this is also from there. And these are some others showing the punya that you collect if you follow the land grant as versus as if you violate it. So the price for violation is I Gadhere Zavize, as you can see here. The punya is as though you have collected the water of the Ganges itself, and you can see a coward bearer bearing the cowards and taking them to the shivling over here. And you can see the individual flanked by two apsaras holding a kalasha with water in it. Just to give you an idea of how much these are in your backyard. These are the 12 known Gadhegals from Mumbai city. Yes, from Mumbai city itself. This is the Pimpalwadi Gadhegal. Okay, this is the Parel Gadhegal that I showed you. Then, of course, you have the Nilkanteshwar Mahadev Gadhegal, which is very badly worn, which was located by Sandeep Dahisarkar. And you have the Powai campus, IIT campus Gadhegal. You have the Jogeshwari Gadhegal, which is now in Sintra, where the Portuguese took it away, and which many people believe was probably at the site of the Jogeshwari rock cut caves itself and was a grant to the caves. You have the Goregaon Ram Mandir Gadhegal, also discovered by Sandeep Dahisarkar. You have the Gorai 1, Gorai 2, and Gorai 3 or Uttan Gadhegals over here at the Bhatti farm, the Gudino farm, and the Munes farm, discovered by Dr. Prachi Moge, Dr. Suraj Pandit and their team. We have another Goregaon Gadhegal over here, discovered recently by Nelson. And we have the BRC Gadhegal, which is broken. The Gadhegal portion is missing, but we know that all the known inscriptions of the ruler all have a Gadhegal at the base, and therefore this has been considered a Gadhegal too. And then there is a Gadhegal at Bhandup, which I'll be showing you shortly. There were perhaps one or two more from Mahim. Both were removed and placed with the DOAM early in the mid 20th century and were found to be an eyesore by the visiting ministers and were shipped off to Nagpur. And we have sadly, though we have been able to identify which ones they are, we haven't really been able to identify where they were picked up from. What do these Gadhegals tell us? They tell us about the use of a donkey and forced bestiality upon the offender's mother. Ai Gadhere Zavise. So women are holding the honor of the family, and to dishonor the family, you dishonor the matriarch of the clan. There cannot be any other greater dishonor than this. The earliest inscriptions in Marathi develop here, and you see the Marathi language depicted on these steles, and therefore these steles are very important. You see the role of Hinduism over here, and it's not a very nice role. You see the role of a very feudal society. You see the Agrahara land grants and the way in which these grants have been given out. You understand the rewards and awards. You understand what kind of wealth is to be accrued from what grant and what purpose it is to be placed for. You also understand the position of women, which is very clear, is getting to be very, very low. It becomes so common that Islamic rulers also issue similar Gadhegal steles. For 600 years in Maharashtra, from the 11th century AD to the 17th century AD, we have the use of Gadhegals. And of course, there are some interesting modern day perceptions about them. This is the Satara Gadhegal of 1591 AD or 1000 Hijri, which is very carefully written over here, the date over here. And you can see the donkey and the woman over here. This is a very, very rare Islamic depiction of a Gadhegal. It's an entire Islamic stele. The upper fragment is broken and is supposedly within the Satara Museum. We have not managed to locate it. This is the Dabhol Gadhegal, or the Dabhol inscription of the Adil Shahi period of Ibrahim Adil Shah, dated 1652 AD. The front is a massive inscription in Persian. The reverse has the same inscription in Marathi and the words Ai Gadhere Zavise. And there was a Gadhegal, you can see the remnants of it, which has been hacked off by the people at the Dabhol Mosque in a later period, before this was collected and brought to the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, where it rests even today. Gaivasru pillars are the next very interesting development, and we didn't even know of their existence till we carried out excavations at Chandor. This is essentially the embodiment of a land grant. We found the first one not far from Chandor, about, well, circuitously almost 6 to 7 kilometers away by road, but in a straight line about 2 kilometers away, 2.5 kilometers away, at a place called Vadghar Mudre. A very simple stone, a Mangal Kalasha, sun, moon, one inset with a cow and a calf, and some kind of a shivling-like protrusion or cylindrical protrusion in front of the cow. We didn't know what this was. As we conducted fieldwork in and around the site of Chandor, at the sister village of Chandor at Nalefodi, we found two distinct Gadhegals. This one has a very beautiful Mangal Kalasha on top, moon, sun, inside cow calf, and again, as I said, some kind of a object in front. This one at Nalefodi too is very interesting. This is some kind of a royal persona carrying out a puja. This is a pujari with a very clear kamandalu in his hand, a very, very elaborate cow with a lot of detail, not in low relief, but in high relief, pilasters on the sides, and of course, a more elaborate object in front and a very clear pediment on top. These are from Chandor itself. This is from the front of plinth number 2, which is the temple at Chandor. Interestingly, the sun and moon are shown below over here. This is the one from Baudwadi, barely 700 meters or 800 meters away in a straight line. This is the very, very worn out one on the ridge where the original site of Chandor used to be according to oral tradition. This one is behind Savant Ali in modern Chandor. And this is what happened when we plotted them. Thanks to Pallavi Gokhale, we had an amazing team of GIS people come down and plot with great accuracy. So we had a cluster of 4 over here at Chandor. We had a cluster of 2 over here at Nalefodi, and we had one at Mudre over here. Didn't make much sense. We spent a lot of time with the local people, understanding the anthropology of the village, the deities of the village, the kathis of the deity, and we realized that we could almost have a one-on-one correspondence with the different wadis that make up this group Gram Panchayat at Chandor. So the group Gram Panchayat at Chandor today consists of Nalefodi over here. It consists of the Chandor group over here and one small group over here, which this village was actually settled less than 200 years ago. And this is part of modern records. So this one doesn't make the grade, but there are 4 of them scattered here, 2 of them scattered here. And we have one of them right here on the hills, very much in line with, okay, what you see over here, which is the cowherd encampment on the pathar, on the rocks over here, which has moved down as time have passed and they no longer have the kind of cattle that they used to. The Gaulis used to have the Chandor Gaulis used to have their village up here on this pathar. So what we realized was that we were looking at a village that is at least 800 years old and has the same 7 elements that made up the village back then. More or less the same 7 elements make up the village even today. And even today, each of them sends a kathi to the main temple. The temple has shifted from here, and now has moved here into the village. And that also happened about 85 years ago and is very documented. So there are no direct references to Chandor or the site of Chandor at all. Sadly, we haven't got anything, but we have the nearby port side of Divyagar. We have the port of Masla. We know that we have a similar Gaivasru image coming to us from the site of Goregaon, which was a very, very important medieval site on the highway that went from Pain all the way down to Goa. And we have, well, 3 Gadhegals at Divyagar, one of which has the Northern Shilara ruler Anantadeva III's inscription of 1245 AD. Anantadeva II issued a very, very interesting inscription at Sopara, in which carved on its lower portion is the image of a cow suckling a calf. It's dated to 1198 AD very precisely. Mirashi very precisely says that the Gai Vasru image, as he calls it, is the physical embodiment of the land grant being given by the ruler, where the cow itself symbolizes the land. The calf is the person to whom the donation has been given, and the milk that he is getting, he, she, it is getting, is actually the wealth accruing from this land that has been donated, and that this is a regnal land grant. That regnal land grant has been issued here, and this is well very clear since it's Anantadeva II issuing it. Further explorations at Supara have revealed at least two more, one which has a Gadhegal and a Gai Vasru on it, one which has just a Gai Vasru. There is a Gai Vasru seen on the Talale copper plates of the Kolhapur Shilahara ruler Gangaraditya, dated to 1110 AD. Something very similar seen on the Miraj copper plates of the Kolhapur Shilahara ruler Marasimha. And smaller Gai Vasru imagery is very common on inscriptional pillars of the Rashtrakutas and their successors in Karnataka. It's also seen on the pediments of the Kolhapur stone inscriptions of Shilahara rulers Gangaraditya 1135 AD and Vijayaditya 1143 AD. The logical route of the Gai Vasru image is from Karnataka to Kolhapur to Raigad to Supara to Mumbai and to the lands of the Shilaharas. There are many other different kinds of stone steles scattered across Maharashtra. Many of them need to be studied in more detail. Some of the most recent ones are these interesting Buddhist Samadhi stones dating back more often than not to about 100, 150 years ago, very often even less. Very often 50, 60 years ago. Some of them are made in cement and they actually have dates inscribed in them, and almost no work whatsoever has been done on them by any scholars, be they Buddhist scholars, be they historical scholars, or be they archaeologists. This is a fascinating subfield to look at. There are also very interesting Jain pillars of Jains committing ritual suicide by starving themselves to death, called Sallekhana. There are also from Karnataka, and we don't have one from Maharashtra yet to the best of my knowledge, people beheading themselves in ritual suicide. We also have sacrifice stones. There is one very interesting one from Satara that we are studying just now, and sadly, since it's under study, I can't depict it here. But we have this beautiful stone image with a sword and cattle shown upon it, and an inscription which we are trying to decipher, but is very worn, but definitely is once again talking about some kind of animal sacrifice. We have a similar animal sacrifice stone from Chandor, which is very badly worn, and photographs make no sense whatsoever. So there are a lot of these different stones in our backyards, and sadly, we are misusing them more than anything else. Hero stones are not only raised to those who die in battle. There is a unique hero stone in Karnataka, which is actually raised in the memory of a dog who died protecting his owner from the attack of a tiger. So there are all kinds of very interesting social values, ideas, and concepts that are there and need to be looked at in much greater detail. So what is happening to them today? This is the beautiful Yadava era stone inscription that you see on the left-hand side top over here from Chaul. It is kept buried up to here in soil because we don't want this Ashli image to be seen and influence any of the younger people in the area. This is the way one from Srivardhan, which is kept buried up to here. And when it was dug out by Harshada, the gentleman from the neighboring house was very agitated and was only calmed down when she assured him that she would be backfilling it before she left. This is one from Lonard, which was being used to beat clothes upon. When we informed them, they have subsequently removed it and nobody seems to know where it has gone. Many of them are dabbed in vermilion and used as deities. This one is a very famous one from Dombivli. It is a beautiful inscription of probably an Islamic king of northern Mumbai called Ali Nakwa, who ruled in the 15th century AD, one of the Naita Rajas. And it's used as a symbol of Shani Dev, and oil is continuously poured upon it and it's washed at regular intervals. And luckily it has been estampaged. Otherwise this inscription would have been totally lost to us forever. This one is even more spectacular. This one is being worshipped inside a temple as Parvati at Chirner. The Mangal Kalasha has had a third eye added to it, and two small eyes have been embedded into it. This is the face of Parvati. The sun and the moon have been covered in vermilion and are the two breasts of Parvati. And when I asked the Pujari what is happening downstairs here, he said this was the Vahana of the goddess. And when I asked him what the Vahana of the goddess was doing, he says, Danda detoi, papi lokanna. So some of the traditions live on, but in a very, very garbled fashion. There is in all probability an inscription underneath this. It is probably too late for that inscription. Not to mention that we are not going to get permission to claim the image because it's in constant worship. There is another later Gadhegal outside which has been washed by all the married women of the village for donkey's years and is completely impossible to read. On the other hand, you have this beautiful Shilahara era image very close to Lonard. The local villagers have housed it very carefully, and you can't see it, but on the wall is a complete transliteration in Marathi of the inscription itself. So there is some hope. This is the Bhandup Gadhegal over here. Sadly, too far gone under oil paint to see anything. And this is a hero stone, a single panel hero stone at Bhandup, both of which are worshipped as a male and female deity. Interesting role reversal at Bhandup itself. This is a picture by Vinayak Parab. This was part of his team during the Salt Explorations project. This is from Korlai and is worshipped as Devi. This is from Paspoli in northern Mumbai and is what we call a tribal hero stone. And this is, well, it's another category altogether. This is also worshipped as Dev. Now, a similar tribal hero stone at the Gaundevi Mandir at Thane, worshipped as Hanuman. A Gajalakshmi stele from the Kondivite caves, probably what gave the caves the Mahakali name. And you can see the vermilion coating it. Such Gajalakshmi stele are also found at a number of sites in Maharashtra and have not ever been tabulated. This from Havele Pada is a very, very interesting hero stone of a man who died fighting a tiger. You can see the tiger here and the tiger pouncing on the man. Interestingly, a reverse moon over here and sun. This one is being worshipped as Vagdev. On the other hand, you also have some of them lying in forlorn, broken condition. You can see either the sun or the moon on top over here broken. You can see the Gaivasu here. It looks like there was some kind of an inscription here, but we don't know whether we are seeing things in it or not. This was discovered by Bhakti Gohil during the Salset project under Dr. Abhijit Dandekar at Gorai. So scattered across the length and breadth of Maharashtra are tons and tons of these monuments of the medieval period, stretching all the way from the 11th, 12th century AD, all the way to the 17th, 18th century AD. These monuments are mute spectators. They are testaments to our history, and historians and archaeologists have almost forgotten about them completely or ignored them completely. It is an entire discipline in itself, waiting for the right students to come and do justice to it. And we need to do this in a hurry because too many of these are being lost. I know personally of one which was broken up by a linesman and used to prop up a telephone pole. Yep, that's the kind of thing that happens. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a brief glimpse of the silent witnesses of Maharashtra's medieval history. I need to thank Dr. Godrej and the Museum Society for calling me, Jason and his entire team for making sure everything goes without a hitch. Very grateful to my teachers, colleagues, students who have been along with me on this journey and made this possible. Without them, it would be impossible. Special thanks to Siddharth and Rajesh, who were with me when I restarted my journey in archaeology at Chandor in 2011. And a very special thank you to Harshada Virkud, who has been researching Gadhegal since 2012 and is now off doing a PhD, which we hope to see in a year or two on this very topic. And of course, finally, a very big thank you to the audience for their patience and the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Mr. Sangrahalaya. Thank you very much.